Some ghost stories are easily explained. A creak in the floorboards, a shadow in the corner, a bad dream after a long night. But then there are the others. Stories that don't just scare you, they stay with you. Stories backed by police reports, newspaper headlines, death records, and witnesses who all say the same thing, even decades apart. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most chilling, most disturbingly real ghost encounters ever recorded. A girl in white who vanishes before your eyes. A mansion filled with sorrow so thick it swallows sound. A forest that locals refuse to enter because they know what's still in there. These aren't urban legends. These are cases, and every one of them ends the same way. Someone runs, but the fear follows. So if you're watching this alone, you might want to double-check your locks, because these next 5 stories, they don't end when the video does. The Lamp Mansion. Deep in the heart of St. Louis, tucked away on the quiet, shadowed street of Demental Place, stands the Lemp Mansion, a sprawling Victorian estate whose grand facade hides a sinister legacy darker than any ghost story could imagine. This is not just a house. It is a tomb for the shattered souls of the Lemp family, a dynasty that built an empire on beer and ambition, only to be consumed by despair, madness, and death so relentless it haunts the very air you breathe the moment you cross its threshold. The mansion's walls don't just hold memories, they trap anguish, so thick it feels like a physical weight pressing down on your chest. The curse began with Frederick Lemp, the eldest son and heir apparent, whose sudden death at just 28 shattered the family's illusion of invincibility. His passing wasn't just a tragedy, it was the first crack in a foundation destined to crumble. William J. Lemp, the proud patriarch, was broken beyond repair. In 1904, overwhelmed by grief and haunted by shadows no one else could see, he took his own life with a gunshot echoing through the mansion's opulent halls. But the darkness was far from finished. 2 years later, William's daughter was found dead, an apparent suicide that plunged the family further into despair. By the time William's son, Billy Jr., inherited the mansion, the empire was collapsing under the brutal blow of Prohibition. Once a vibrant place of laughter and power, the mansion grew cold, silent, and heavy with secrets. Unable to escape the crushing pressure, Billy Jr. shot himself in his office in 1922, the bullet tearing through not just flesh, but hope itself. The final blow came in 1949, when Charles Lemp, the last surviving heir, killed his beloved dog in a desperate act of sorrow, and then turned the gun on himself, leaving behind a chilling note: "Blame it on no one but me." That note still chills the bones of anyone who hears it, a haunting echo of a family destroyed from within. Since that time, the Lemp Mansion has been anything but silent. Those brave or foolish enough to spend the night here speak of horrors that defy explanation. Doors slam shut with the force of unseen hands, glass shatters in empty rooms, and the eerie sound of hooves pounding above you shakes the floorboards, as if restless horses pace the attic in eternal torment. Guests have reported the grand piano playing itself in the dead of night, keys moving beneath invisible fingers, the mournful melody floating through the darkness like a spectral lullaby. Shadows flicker and shift, but when you turn, nothing's there, only the oppressive feeling of being watched by something not human. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to the mansion for decades, hoping to capture evidence of the unseen. EMF meters spike violently without cause, cameras record ghostly figures dressed in period clothing gliding through walls, and audio devices pick up disembodied voices whispering threats, pleading, and curses. During a 2010 investigation, team members heard chilling words in the attic: "You're mine." Their instruments locked up, lights flickered, and an invisible force seemed to push against their very bodies. In 2023, new investigators recorded full-bodied apparitions and cold spots so intense that breath turned to mist inside the house, especially near the infamous Gates of Hell, the iron stairwell descending into the basement, where many say the darkest energies reside. Visitors don't just feel fear here, they experience a suffocating sadness, a crushing weight of despair that seeps into their skin and claws at their hearts. Some collapse into dizzy weakness. Others break down in tears, overcome by the mansion's mournful presence. During special Halloween tours, People have reported seeing a tall, shadowy figure dressed in 1920s attire silently gliding down hallways at exactly 3 a.m., its hollow eyes fixed on them before vanishing without a trace. Skeptics dismiss these stories as clever marketing or the result of suggestion fueled by a tragic family history. They point to the well-documented struggles with mental illness, addiction, and depression, claiming the hauntings are just echoes of grief and human imagination. But those who have lived it, the employees, the guests, the investigators, know better. They feel the mansion's sorrow like a living thing, hear the voices in the walls, and sense the lingering presence of a family cursed to relive their torment night after night. Outside, the crumbling brewery, once the beating heart of the Lemp Empire, stands abandoned, a hulking skeleton of brick and rust. Its empty windows stare like hollow eyes, watching over the mansion's lingering shadows. Together, they tell a story of a family consumed by its own demons, trapped in a cycle of wealth, madness, and death. To step inside the Lemp Mansion is to enter a nightmare frozen in time, where history and horror intertwine so tightly it's impossible to separate fact from the supernatural. It's a place where the past refuses to rest, where every creak and whisper carries the weight of broken promises and lost souls. And if you listen closely in the dark, you might just hear the soft, sorrowful footsteps of the Lemps themselves, still wandering, still waiting, forever trapped in a house that won't let them go. The Humpty Doo Poltergeist. In the sweltering heat of Australia's Northern Territory, nestled in the quiet, semi-rural suburb of Humpty Doo, one of the most bizarre and persistent poltergeist cases ever recorded began unfolding in August of 1997. What would start as a handful of unexplained events in a modest rental home at 90 McMinns Drive would soon escalate into a media frenzy, a police investigation, a courtroom dispute, and one of the most hotly debated supernatural incidents in modern Australian history. It became known simply as the Humpty Doo Poltergeist. The home was rented by 5 young adults, Karen Ridsdale, her partner Brian, and 3 others, who were struggling financially and had recently taken up residence in the single-story property. What began as occasional loud bangs and items going missing quickly turned violent. Rocks and small chunks of concrete started falling inside the house, seemingly from nowhere. At first, the residents suspected pranksters. They searched the roof, the ceiling, even the attic space. No one was found. But then the stones began falling in closed rooms, in broad daylight, often directly in front of witnesses. Some landed near their feet. Others struck walls with enough force to chip paint. Then came the scratches. Several residents claimed to wake up with deep, fresh scratches across their backs and arms, sometimes while others were watching them sleep. These weren't minor itches. They appeared suddenly and bled. Doors slammed on their own, household items shattered spontaneously, and what made the case especially disturbing was that the activity didn't stop when outsiders arrived. It intensified. The first people to investigate were the Northern Territory Police. Officers visited the home several times, initially assuming vandalism. They conducted thorough searches of the property. No intruders, no trick wires, no holes in the ceiling, no access from the outside. But still, the activity persisted. Constable Steve Rossi, who visited the home, would later state in interviews that he saw items move with no visible cause. Journalists from local newspapers were invited, and they too reportedly witnessed pebbles falling straight down from nowhere. Soon after, the story broke in national media. Headlines read, "Haunted in Humpty Doo," and "Rocks rained from the ceiling." Paranormal investigators were contacted. Paul Cropper and Tony Healy, co-authors of the book Australian Poltergeist, arrived on site and observed phenomena firsthand. According to Cropper, small rocks and bits of concrete would seem to materialize and drop straight down onto the kitchen table while no one stood above. They documented the incidents with photographs and audio recordings, and while they remained cautious in their analysis, they admitted the events defied conventional explanation. Notably, the activity didn't follow the patterns of a typical haunting. There were no ghostly apparitions, no cold spots, no voices from beyond. What was happening was purely physical: rocks, objects, impact. It was a classic poltergeist in the traditional German sense. Noisy ghost. but without the religious or spiritual context. If it was a hoax, it was one of the most elaborate and sustained in recent memory. If it wasn't, then something truly unexplainable was happening. One of the most bizarre aspects of the Humpty Doo poltergeist is that the property owners eventually attempted to evict the tenants, not for non-payment of rent, but because of the damage and supernatural events occurring on the property. The tenants challenged this in court, and astonishingly, the magistrate ruled in their favor. The rationale? There was insufficient evidence to suggest the tenants were to blame for the disturbances. In effect, the judge ruled that the cause of the destruction was unknown and allowed the tenants to stay. As public attention grew, a local news crew from Channel 7 attempted to debunk the story. During filming, they managed to capture one of the tenants appearing to throw a small item across the room. Skeptics quickly pounced, declaring the whole story a hoax. But Paul Cropper and others pointed out that this single incident didn't account for the dozens of others witnessed by journalists, police officers, and investigators over weeks of visits. Furthermore, if it were all faked, it would have required multiple individuals working in perfect coordination, dropping objects from ceiling panels without making noise, creating injuries, and sustaining the hoax 24/7 in front of police and reporters. There was never any motive established. No financial gain, no fame, and no long-term benefit ever came to the tenants. And then, almost as suddenly as it started, the activity stopped. By early 1998, the house fell silent. No more falling rocks, no slamming doors, no flying cutlery. The residents eventually moved out. The house itself was sold and renovated. To this day, the new owners report no disturbances. The phenomena have never reappeared at that house or elsewhere. The Dark Entry Forest. In the summer of 1918, Dr. William C. Clark, a distinguished New York City physician and prominent member of the American Forestry Association, purchased a large tract of woodland in northwestern Connecticut, in a sparsely populated area known as the Dark Entry Forest. Dr. Clark, a man of science, had long been captivated by the therapeutic power of nature. He believed in forest medicine, the idea that time spent in pure wilderness could calm the nervous system, lower blood pressure, and reset the modern mind. He and his wife, Harriet Bank Clark, were seeking refuge from the relentless noise of New York. What better place than the silent, pine-covered hills of Cornwall, Connecticut? They built a modest but elegant summer home deep in the trees, and for a time it was paradise. But just beyond their tree line, hidden behind thick hemlock groves and centuries of undergrowth, lay something else. The ruins of a forgotten village, a place that hadn't appeared on maps in nearly 100 years. Its name was Dudleytown, and locals, especially the older ones, never said the name out loud. Dudleytown was founded in the 1740s by the Dudley family, distant relatives of Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman executed for treason under King Henry VII. According to legend, a curse was placed on the Dudley lineage, and that darkness followed their descendants across the Atlantic to New England. The settlers of Dudleytown struggled almost immediately. The soil was too rocky to farm, the forest was unusually dark, and isolation from neighboring communities made survival difficult. But then came the tragedies: mysterious disappearances, sudden suicides, mental breakdowns. A man named Abiel Dudley reportedly went insane and was kept locked in his own house for years. Another resident, Gershon Hollister, died under suspicious circumstances while building a barn. The entire Carter family was wiped out by disease. By the mid-1800s, Dudleytown was mostly abandoned, and by 1900, the forest had reclaimed everything. Only stone cellar holes and ghostly outlines of structures remained, moss-covered scars from a community that had simply vanished. This is the land Dr. Clark unknowingly, or perhaps curiously, built upon. The first sign something was wrong came from the animals. The birds that filled the trees upon their arrival disappeared within weeks. The couple's dog, a young collie named Tansy, bolted into the woods one morning and was never seen again. At first, Clark attributed the changes to natural causes, predators, nesting migrations. But soon, things became harder to explain. Harriet started waking in the night, clutching the bedsheets, convinced someone was outside the window. Clark would check, always finding nothing, but he noted in his journal that her fear was genuine. Then came the voices, soft, indistinct murmurings, sometimes in the middle of the day, heard not in their heads but from just beyond the trees, like whispers carried on wind that never blew. Then the dreams. Harriet dreamed of figures without faces, standing in circles, singing in tones she couldn't describe. She began writing strange, disconnected phrases in her journal, words like "the gate is open" and "they are beneath us." According to Clark's great-nephew, who later inherited a box of the couple's letters, Harriet's behavior deteriorated over the course of weeks. Her hair fell out in clumps. She stopped eating. She became obsessed with the cellar and refused to let William go down there, muttering that they're waiting below. Then one day, while William was away at a conference in the city, Harriet suffered a complete psychological collapse. The details vary depending on the source. Some versions claim she was found standing motionless in the living room, repeating a prayer in reverse. Others say she tried to flee into the woods barefoot and had to be restrained. The official record from the nearby sanitarium lists acute psychotic break with paranoid features. She was committed. She never recovered. Clark never returned to the house. Instead, he helped incorporate the Dark Entry Forest Association, an environmental nonprofit that took over the land, blocked access to the ruins, and still manages the forest to this day. The stated goal was conservation. But some believe Clark's true motivation was to protect the world from whatever lingered in the woods. Today, Dudleytown is completely closed to the public, surrounded by no trespassing signs and patrolled by security. Yet that hasn't stopped the stories. Hikers who sneak in often report electronic malfunctions, disorientation, and audio hallucinations. Some emerge shaken, saying they felt stalked by something they couldn't see. Skeptics point out that there's no historical proof of a curse. Many of the supposed madness cases can be explained by isolation, mercury poisoning from hat making, and diseases common in the 1700s. Harriet Clark's medical records, for example, never list the word supernatural. But those who've been near Dudleytown say otherwise. The silence there is unnatural. The air is thick, even birds avoid it. And then there's the recurring story, told by locals for generations, of a hidden stairway in the woods, carved from stone, leading down into the ground, and of something still alive beneath it. Whether Dr. Clark stumbled into a bad patch of history or a truly cursed landscape remains unknown. What is certain is that a brilliant, rational physician, one who trusted science above all, came to these woods for healing and left forever changed. Some say Harriet went mad, some say she was invited. Either way, Dudleytown is still there, hiding under the trees, watching, waiting, as silent as it was a century ago. Monte Cristo Homestead. In the depths of Junee, New South Wales, perched on a lonely hilltop above the railway line, stands a grand Victorian mansion built in 1885 by a wealthy grazier named Christopher William Crawley. He called it Monte Cristo Homestead. Today it's often billed as Australia's most haunted house, and once you hear what happened inside, it's easy to see why. On paper, it was supposed to be a fairy tale. Crawley and his wife Caroline built their dream home, overlooking fields of sheep and grain. But in 1888, tragedy struck. Caroline died in childbirth, and from that moment forward, misfortune seemed to settle over the homestead like a heavy fog. Over the next 6 decades, at least 10 people died at the house from 1914 to 1948. Children, elderly residents, even a gardener, each under oddly tragic or violent circumstances. There are stories, but no official confirmation beyond oral history, of a young Crawley child tumbling down the grand staircase, of a maid who fell from the balcony in what some believe was either suicide or foul play, of Morris, the stable boy, who was so sick he went to bed while his master tried to teach him a lesson by setting the straw mattress alight. Though the exact truth is impossible to pin down, generations of guides and visitors at the now shuttered homestead repeat the same version. The boy's screams were heard for weeks after his death, echoing through the coach house at night. And that's only the beginning. A mentally ill servant named Harold, son of a caretaker, was chained to his mother's bedside for decades before being moved to an asylum, where he died shortly after her. One of the post-Crawley caretakers was found murdered in his cottage, though the rest of the family denied any ghostly involvement. By the mid-20th century, the Crawley line had died out, the property fell into disrepair, and by 1963, it was purchased by Reg and Olive Ryan. They transformed the neglected mansion into a museum and curio shop, capitalizing on the house's growing reputation for odd occurrences, before closing to public tours in early 2025. But what really keeps people talking, year after year, are the unexplained events visitors report. Doors slamming, lights flickering on and off, sudden bitter cold in a single room, phantom footsteps along the back corridor when the house is empty. Some technicians testing devices say their equipment fails inside certain rooms. EMF meters spike erratically, and handheld cameras produce blurry orbs in photos taken under lamplight. Even more unnerving, multiple people describe overwhelming waves of sadness or despair in specific areas. Some claim they felt respiratory tightness or couldn't catch their breath at all for brief moments. In an old bedroom illuminated only by moonlight, whispered names, often Crawley, are said to drift through the air even when no one else is in the building. Yet skeptics are right to shake their heads. Most of the tragedies happened before the advent of formal investigation or electricity, so no police reports, hospital files, or media coverage Horseland contaminated them. Many deaths, including the maid's fall, aren't well documented in the family ledgers. Psychological stress, Victorian-era illnesses, accidents, even drunk driving, all perfectly plausible explanations. The Cornwall Historical Society has said much the same about Dudleytown. Just like Monte Cristo, isolated places attract legends. Still, something about the place pushes people out. One night, a team conducting audio EVP recordings reported their equipment glitching, then turning back on again to capture what sounded like a child laughing, in perfect English, clear as day. The next day, half the group got ill with nausea and dizziness, and 4 recordings across 3 devices had identical jump cuts in the same location. They insisted they hadn't touched the gear. So what was Dr. Crawley's original aim? To build a monument to prosperity. What remains today is a tomb of silence. The house stands empty, locked, off limits, the windows boarded, but the cellar steps and walls behind the broken greenhouse still bear scorch and claw marks. Locals still leave bouquets at the gate. When you watch paranormal television or read ghost hunting blogs, Monte Cristo Homestead almost always comes up first. Because unlike a fleeting whisper in a wind tunnel, this place combines physical tragedy, consistent witness reports over decades, and technological breakdowns. People call it an intelligent haunting, or residual energy, or just something rooted in grief. But here's the final twist. The homestead is now literally shuttered. The Ryans ended tourism in 2025, and the house no longer publishes dates, no longer hosts tours. They say it's for safety and preservation. A few locals whisper it's because the hauntings became too real, that the house doesn't want new visitors anymore. The key is under lock, and the property is silently patrolled. It leaves us with a single question. Did Dr. Crawley's dream become a kind of damnation? Was it the weight of grief, that the house remembers death too well? Or is there something older than memory still walking those hallways? The answers don't come now, but the house whispers, and if you listen, it's as if the walls themselves are sighing. Some things live beyond explanation, and every year someone somewhere hears them calling from the hilltop over Junee, Monte Cristo Homestead. Resurrection Mary. It's just past midnight on a cold, quiet stretch of Archer Avenue, an old, winding road that cuts southwest from the heart of Chicago toward the quiet suburbs of Justice, Illinois. The streetlights are flickering. The wind carries the faint scent of winter and gasoline. And up ahead, standing alone by the roadside in a pale white dress, is a young woman. She looks out of place, like she stepped out of another decade. Her hair is soft, golden, her expression is blank, and her thumb is out. You slow down, you roll down your window. She leans in and softly asks for a ride to Resurrection Cemetery. You let her in. She's cold to the touch but polite, quiet. She barely speaks, but when she does, her voice is thin and strange, like it's being remembered more than heard. You glance at her in the rearview mirror, and just as the gates of Resurrection Cemetery come into view, she's gone. vanished. No door opened, no sound, just empty air and the lingering scent of roses. You've just met Resurrection Mary, the most famous, most chilling ghost in Chicago's history, and you wouldn't be the first or the last. The legend of Resurrection Mary began in the 1930s, when local drivers started reporting encounters with a mysterious young woman hitchhiking near the old O. Henry Ballroom, not far from Resurrection Cemetery. According to the stories, Mary had been dancing at the ballroom one night when she got into an argument with her boyfriend. She stormed off into the cold, walking home alone along Archer Avenue, and never made it. Some say she was hit by a car. Others say she was attacked. Whatever the truth, she died on that road, and her family buried her in Resurrection Cemetery in the same white dress she'd worn that night. Since then, she's been trying to get home. Over the decades, her story hasn't faded, it's grown. Dozens of drivers, cabbies, police officers, even priests have told nearly identical tales. A quiet girl in a vintage white gown asking for a ride, only to disappear without a trace when they pass the cemetery gates. One of the most famous sightings happened in 1979. A man named Ralph picked up a blonde woman outside a bar on Archer. She said very little, just asked to be taken home. As they neared the cemetery, she suddenly vanished from his moving car, and she's not always subtle. One night in the 1970s, two motorists claimed to see Mary standing inside the locked cemetery gate. When they approached, she grabbed the bars and screamed for help, only to fade from view before their eyes. For years afterward, the cemetery gate had what looked like scorched handprints, twisted into the metal like something had tried to claw its way out. Cemetery officials said it was caused by a maintenance truck, but no one believed that, because too many people had seen her, described her, felt the drop in temperature when she entered their car, smelled the perfume she left behind. The details match again and again from people who never knew each other. She isn't a shadow on the wall or a flicker of light in a hallway. She's flesh and bone until she isn't. Paranormal investigators have tried to track down who she really was. Two names come up most: Mary Bregovi, who died in a 1934 car crash, and Anna Maria Norkus, a 12-year-old Lithuanian girl who died in 1927 after a tragic accident. Both were buried at Resurrection Cemetery. Both were described as beautiful, blonde, fond of dancing. But neither perfectly fits the legend. Maybe that's the point. Maybe she's not one person. Maybe she's every girl who never made it home. The road itself, Archer Avenue, is old. It's quiet. It passes through forests, swamps, and cemeteries. Some say it runs along ancient native burial grounds. Others believe it's simply cursed. But no one doubts that something is out there. A presence, a pattern, a woman in white who's still waiting for a ride. And here's the part that gets under your skin. No one ever feels scared when they see her. They feel sad, heavy, like something's unfinished, something unresolved, like she just wants to get home. So the next time you're driving Archer Avenue at night and you see someone standing alone in the cold, in a long white dress, don't stop, or do. Just know that if you do, she might already be in the back seat.